You know those ancient idols that appear in the Bible? Two very famous ones are Baal and Dagon. Baal is the best known, but Dagon is also important. He is like an ancient Mesopotamian god, even considered the father of Baal. Do you know how long it has existed? Since about 3,000 years before Christ. In other words, he is one of the oldest gods in this region. The Philistines, an ancient people, were fans of Dagon. They performed special rituals and ceremonies to worship him, all based on their beliefs. Dagon was like a boss among their gods, like the most powerful. The exact details of these rituals are not very clear in the Bible, but looking at the historical context you can get an idea. Just imagine how they imagined Dagon. A crazy mix of human and fish. Yes, half of his body was fish and the other half was human. This showed his connection with the land and sea. Crazy, right? They had this image of him, half human, half fish, as a symbol of his power. So, even if we don't know all the details, we can understand a little about what the worship of this ancient god was like, right? Leave your like and subscribe to our channel and stay up to date with all our daily videos. The rituals surrounding the Dagon likely included offerings, prayers, and even sacrifices. Although we do not know all the details about how the Philistines worshipped Dagon, it is clear that they considered him an important god and sought his favor and protection. But ultimately, the story in the Bible shows that worshipping Dagon didn't do much good, because there is only one true God. The Philistines thought Dagon could protect them, bring prosperity, and win battles. They attributed their victories and successes to the power of Dagon. They probably did everything to please him, such as offering food, drink, and other symbolic gifts. In the Bible, Dagon is mentioned twice, and both times he is related to the Philistines, from the time of the Judges to the time of Samuel and Saul. The Philistines actually believed that Dagon was their god. The first time we hear about Dagon in the Bible is during an important event. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel. I will tell you the story of Samson and his fight with the Philistines. Samson was chosen by God to free the Israelites from the oppression of the Philistines, but he ended up falling in love with a Philistine woman named Delilah. She, with tricks and bribery, discovered the secret of Samson's strength, which was in his hair, which represented his connection with the power of God. When they cut his hair, Samson became weak. The Philistines took him to the temple of their god called Dagon. Then the leaders of the Philistines gathered together to make a great sacrifice for their Dagon, because they were happy to have captured Samson. They thought that their Dagon had defeated the God of Israel, because they handed Samson into their hands. They were so happy that they even thanked their Dagon for it. But the story still continues. The Philistines were super happy because they captured Samson and thought it was because of their god, Dagon. They even made a great sacrifice in honor of their Dagon. But the story didn't end there. The Philistines caught Samson, blinded him, and even made fun of him during their ceremonies. Imagine how evil. But Samson didn't give up. At a large meeting of the Philistines in a huge house, Samson asked to be taken to the columns that supported the place. And then, when he was there, he asked God one last time for the strength to take revenge on the Philistines for blinding him. And God heard. Samson used all his strength and pushed the columns. The house fell on the Philistine leaders and everyone there. He managed to wipe out more enemies in death than in life. It was an incredible victory for Samson against the Philistines, even if it cost him his life. This story shows that God's power is far greater than any false god like Dagon of the Philistines. Even though the Philistines worshipped their Dagon, this god couldn't really help them. What makes Samson's victory even more incredible is that it happened when he was at his weakest, all broken, humiliated, and blind. At that time, Samson had to admit that he could only depend on God. Before that, we don't see much of Samson praying. But when he saw that he was in a difficult situation, he truly turned to God, with a heart full of faith. And look at this. Samson even accepted help from a boy. He put aside his pride and strength and showed that he was willing to receive help even from someone weaker. This humility and trust in God paved the way for Samson's final victory. His story teaches us that true strength and victory do not come from our own abilities or confidence in ourselves, but rather from our surrender to God and our firm faith in the power of God. Sometimes it is in our most difficult moments that we find our true strength. There is a very important moment in Samson's story when he shows that true strength comes from God. Even though he was hurt and humiliated, Samson trusted God with all his heart. He did not find himself because of his physical strength, but because of his faith and total dependence on God. And look what happened. God entered history and gave Samson a victory that was even greater than all the others he had achieved before. And the lesson we learn from his story is that when we are weak and recognize that only God can help us, that is when his strength really shines through us. Even in the most difficult times, we can trust that God is in control. Samson's story reminds us that even in the moments when we feel most vulnerable, God can transform everything and make incredible things happen that show his power and bring glory to his name. And there's more. In the Bible, in the book of 1 Samuel, there is a very important part too, where the Israelites are fighting the Philistines again and end up losing the Ark of the Covenant. But that is another story. I'm going to tell you about a part of the history of the Israelites where two guys, Hophni and Phinehas, were acting very wrong. They were doing bad things that made God very angry with the people of Israel. They even tried to make a smart move by taking the Ark of the Covenant into battle, thinking they were going to win, but they didn't know that God had left their side. So, the Israelites went to war trusting only in the Ark, thinking that it would bring them victory. But the problem is that God was no longer with them, even if they didn't know it. And then, in the battle, the Philistines won. They defeated the Israelites and even took the Ark of the Covenant. After that, the Philistines took the Ark to their temple, where they had a statue of their god, Dagon. They placed the Ark next to the statue of Dagon, and it was a hell of a mess. But this story still continues. Just imagine what happened after the Philistines placed the Ark of the Covenant near their statue of Dagon. The next morning, when they went to see, Dagon was lying on the ground, face down, in front of the Ark of the Lord. They thought it was an accident and lifted Dagon again. But then, the next morning, the scene was repeated. Dagon was there, again, lying on the ground in front of the Ark of the Lord. Only this time, Dagon's hands and head had been cut off. Only his torso remained. The Philistines, of course, were surprised, thinking that their Dagon had defeated the God of Israel. They even left the Ark of the Covenant at their Dagon's house, thinking it was a total victory. But God still had some tricks up his sleeve. The next day, when the Philistines came to see again, things got even crazier. I will tell you what happened after the Philistines placed Dagon near the Ark of the Lord. The next morning there was Dagon, lying on the ground again, face down, in front of the Arkansas. They thought it was an accident and put Dagon back in his place. But then, the next day, it happened again. Dagon was there, lying on the ground again in front of the Arkansas. Only this time, Dagon's hands and head had been broken. Only his body remained. The Philistines must have been terrified when they saw this. Imagine the scene. Their Dagon, who they thought was so powerful, fallen before the Ark of the Lord and, on top of that, completely broken. They saw that it wasn't just a coincidence because it happened several times. This story really shows who the true God is, right? This whole story with Dagon, the god of the Philistines, shows something very important. No idol or image made by man can stand before the power of God. Dagon was humiliated and destroyed, showing that there is no point in believing in gods who cannot do anything. The lesson we learn from this is that we need to worship only the true God, the one who is alive and powerful over everything. We cannot fall into the trap of trusting false gods or idols that have no life. Our devotion must only be to the true God, who deserves all our adoration and respect.